Bubba Strait, who is the famous singer George Strait's son, has had to deal with the fact that his father's fame and success always make things look better for him. It looked like Bubba would be lost in the darkness until he found out something that no one else knew. What exactly did Bubba find out that changed his life so drastically? That's what this short is about. Where did George Strait's son go? Let's start. To get an idea of what Bubba went through as a child, we need to talk about how important his father was. How important George Strait was to country music and how he still is. When you think of real, raw country music, George Strait is the first artist that comes to mind. And he doesn't show up as someone who helped that country music style along the way. Nope, he was the first person to mix old-fashioned country music with more modern sounds, making it fun for a new generation and every generation after that. George did more than just bring the past back to life. He did it in a way that made people want to pay attention. This is when a lot of fans felt like country music really felt like country music. He was the only one who did this old new thing. He didn't really have any competition. Soon George Strait became the face of real country music, which some people began to call neo-traditional country. George was called King of Country because of this. When you see some of his stats, you might say that the award is well-deserved. He is one of the most popular music artists of all time, having sold over 70 million records in the US and more than 120 million records around the world. This makes him the 12th best-selling album recording artist in the US. But George's dad was only a middle school math teacher and ran a 2,000-acre ranch that had been in the family for a long time. How did he get so large? Born in Poteet, Texas, on May 18, 1952. George grew up in southern Texas in a small town called Pearsall. He spent a lot of time with his dad, John Strait, growing up. When George was in elementary school, his mom and dad split up, leaving John to raise George and his brother Buddy. The boys did work on the ranch with their dad. It seems like they've been running the land for a long time. That is why it is not a surprise that they knew a lot about the country West. It happened at George's high school, Pearsall High, that he started his journey with singing. He said that he loved the Beatles a lot. The Beatles were big. I listened to them a lot, along with all the other popular bands at the time, he said. George joined a rock band called the Stoics, and they loved the Beatles. In high school, George played in a few more rock bands, even though he wasn't very good at playing the guitar. It was funny because he wasn't even playing country songs back then. He spent a year at Southwest Texas State University after high school. Before coming to the U.S., he married Norma, his high school sweetheart, in secret. Army in 1971. A big part of his life was still music. He worked on his music skills and sang while he was in Hawaii. At this point, he became interested in country music by acts such as Hank Williams, George Jones, Merle Haggard, and especially Bob Wills, who was known for Western swing music. Soon, he joined his first country music band at the Army base. After his time in the Army, he went back to Southwest Texas State University and got a degree in farming. While he was at college, he came across a flyer for a country band called Stony Ridge and chose to join. After he became lead singer, he quickly changed the name of the band to Ace in the Hole. They often played shows at bars near campus as the Ace in the Hole Band. There were even bars in South and Central Texas where they played, all the way up to Huntsville and Houston. The young band was now well known in the area and had the chance to open for big bands like the Texas Playboys. They had chances to sing some of George's songs for a small Houston label called D Records. The songs were that Don't Change the Way I Feel About You and I Can't Go On Dying Like This. The band didn't make any money because the songs didn't connect with people. So band members kept working part-time jobs in the area to eat. George kept working during the day on the land his family owned to make extra money. One interesting thing about George was that he had no real contacts in the music business while he was playing with his band. But his friend Irv Woolsey, who ran a bar where George's band played, used to work for a major record company before he opened his own bar. That's why Woolsey got some people from Nashville to come to Texas to see George and his band play. They liked the music, but they didn't think many people would be interested in the band's Western swing sound. That's why they left without making a deal with George. But despite the setback, he made many trips to Nashville to try to get a record deal. But every label turned him down because, like the people who had come to see him, the big names in the business weren't sure about his traditional style in a market that liked a more polished look and pop country sound at the time. George thought about giving up music because, ironically, his music was being turned down everywhere in Nashville. He was ready to take the job designing cow pens when it came up. In fact, he told his band that he was going to quit, but his wife talked him out of it for another year. George thought about it and chose to keep playing music for another year. He would soon be glad he did. Soon after, in February 1981, he signed a record deal with the big label MCA. He had to start with just one song under the rules of the deal. If the song did well, they give him a bigger deal. The one song was called Unwound, and it pretty much undid all the bad feelings people had about George's style of music at first. That many people liked it that it got to number 6 on the Hot Country Songs chart in Billboard magazine. MC had no choice but to give him a longer contract because he kept his end of the deal by publishing a hit song. And that was the start of a great professional music career. He signed his group because George cared about his family and his neighborhood. They had been with him through good times and bad. When he went solo, the best player in the band became his backup. George put out more than 12 records in the next 10 years. These all sold more than 1 million copies each. Straight Country, his first honky-tonk record, got good reviews because it was different from the popular pop-style country music at the time. Soon after, Straight from the Heart, his first #1 country hit, came out, Memory with No Heart. George had 17 #1 songs after that, including 5 in a row. When Eddie Rabbitt got sick, he also started to appear at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. He played there often. More than 20 shows were held there, and more than 1 million people came. He won the CMA Award for Best Male Vocalist in 1985 and put out his first record of his best songs. His record, Something Special, which had the hit song The Chair, went to #1 that same year. This is why George won CMA Vocalist of the Year again in 1986 and put out his 4th #1 record. But that year, something terrible happened that almost killed George. There was a disaster. George and Norma, his wife, already had 2 children. Jen was their first child. She was born on October 6, 1972. In 1981, they had their second child, George Harvey Strait Jr., who they called Bubba. But Jennifer, the family's 13-year-old daughter, died in a car accident in 1986. Gregory Wilson Allen, 18, from Staples, Texas, was driving the car she was in. The accident happened because the driver was going too fast and not controlling the car properly, which caused it to flip over. Jennifer wasn't wearing a seatbelt, so she was partly thrown out of the car and died right away. After this tragedy, George had to limit how much he talked to the public. He stopped giving interviews and didn't talk about his daughter's death for over a year. He later talked about the reason he chose to do this. I shut down even more after my daughter died. That's when I shut down for good. Nobody who wasn't close to me made me not want to talk to them. So I thought that probably nothing worse could happen. So this is what I'm going to do. George kept making music to deal with this terrible event. For 11 weeks in a row, 11 of his songs were number one. It was the first time a country record ever went straight to number one on the charts. George started to act in movies with pure country. He sang a lot of well-known songs for the movie. Like I Cross My Heart and Heartland. Another thing he did was put out a special album of his songs called George Out of the Box. It sold more than 5 million copies. This collection is the best-selling box set in the history of country music up to this point. George kept putting out great music. Entertainment Weekly said that at this point in his work, he was so well-liked that, with his style and ease, George could make even the silliest songs into hits on the radio. After that, President George W. Bush gave him the National Medal of the Arts. He had been making songs for 30 years at this point. According to USA Today, he always makes high-quality songs without any trouble. If ever there was a natural in country music, it's George Strait, said another review. His album Troubadour went straight to the top of the country album lists. It was the first single from the album that went to number one on the country charts. George won 2 CMA awards for the album, one for Album of the Year and the other for Single of the Year. He also won a Grammy Award for the album and was named an Artist of the Decade by the Academy of Country Music. In September 2012, George announced his Cowboy Rides Away tour, which came out at the same time as his album Love Is Everything. When George's single Give It All We Got Tonight reached number one, it was the 60th number one hit for him. He had so many number one hits on the Billboard Country Airplay charts that he broke Conway Twitty's record for the most number one hits on Billboard's Hot Country Songs chart, beating Twitty's 40 with a record 60. He now had the most number one songs of any artist in any genre. George set himself another challenge. He was known for his unique tours, which included a 360-degree setup and festival-styled arrangements. His last concert for the Cowboy Rides Away tour was at a TAN-DT Stadium in Arlington, Texas, in front of more than 100,000 fans. It broke the record for the largest indoor concert in North America in 30 years, beating the Rolling Stones show at the New Orleans Superdome in 1981. The concert also broke the record for the most money made at a single country concert, with over $18 million. In 2024, he had the most fans ever at a U.S. concert for a solo performance, with over 110,000 people watching at Kyle Field at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. He beat the Grateful Dead's record by more than 3,000 people. Since Bubba, George's only son, has such a famous father, you might think he would just sit around and do nothing with his life. Obviously, Bubba was very close to his father as a child. The death of his sister brought the family closer together than ever before. Because of his father's work, Bubba was exposed to live performances and songwriting from a very young age. He went with him to performances. He was able to witness his father's love of music at practice sessions and other events, and this early exposure quickly shaped the child's mind. However, his father made sure he focused on school, which gave him both the unique experience of being born into a family with one of the greatest living musicians and the opportunity to study. This arrangement was based on his father's own experience, of course, as well as some realistic moments. This was reflected in Bubba's desire to go his own way and maybe make a name for himself in something. He began competing in rodeo while at Texas A&M and joined the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association as a roper after graduation. He and his father both loved team roping. One thing that George's fans learned was that he wasn't just a cowboy in his songs, he was a real cowboy. Being a cowboy was something he talked about. My dad taught me how to live the cowboy life. He was a cowboy the ranch and what cowboys do and how they work. You know, there are certain things you do. He also said, I still have a lot to learn, but I tried to bring that Western heritage into my life and career and pass it on to my family. Everyone already knows that George was born and raised on his dad's ranch. This is something you might not have known. He spent a lot of time on his own ranch in South Texas riding horses, taking care of cattle, and competing in team roping at rodeos. Ranching and team roping were big parts of his life outside of music. He even raised steers just for the George Strait Team Roping Classic, a big event he started with his brother Buddy more than 20 years ago. They are said to raise these animals because they love them, not because they want to make money. George's love for ranching came from his father. George was thrilled to learn that his son, George Jr., also enjoyed team roping. Bubba's competitors in these events were the high point of George's weeks. In an interview with the Team Roping Journal, George said, "Watching my son win a roping, or even just watching him compete, is the best feeling in the world. I've been lucky to win a couple of buckles with Bubba, and that, my friends, is the ultimate." His father got to see his son compete in the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Bubba competed in the George Strait Team Roping Classic, a famous annual team roping event held at the San Antonio Rose Palace for many years. Bubba's dad and uncle helped make what began as a small, family-focused event into the biggest open team roping in the U.S., with cash prizes worth millions of dollars. Bubba worked very hard to become known as a professional roper, living up to his father's first and last name. Bubba was also a very good songwriter. He kept improving his skills in the music business even after he stopped roping and started writing songs and working with his father. His first big break came when he was in the song Heartland in 1992. He hasn't done his own show since 2006. Now he only does it when he's singing with his dad. He has helped write songs for George's 4 studio albums after that, including Here for a Good Time, Love is Everything, Cold Beer Conversation, and Honky Tonko Time Machine. Despite not having any solo songs, he has worked on tracks like Living for the Night and Out of Sight, Out of Mind from Twang. Even George said that Bubba was the one who helped him start writing again. Bubba had always gone with his dad to events like the Country Music Hall of Fame Medallion Ceremony and the 44th Annual Academy of Country Music Awards. George was named Artist of the Decade at the 50th Annual ASCAP Country Music Awards in Nashville. In 2014, Bubba joined his dad on stage in Arlington, Texas, for the last show of George's 2-year The Cowboy Rides Away tour. The two of them sang Arkansas Dave, a song that Bubba had written himself. George stopped touring after that show, and the performance was recorded for CMT's George Strait The Cowboy Rides Away live concert special. Bubba doesn't want to stop writing songs for his dad anytime soon, though, because he enjoys working with his dad. Family is a big deal in the Strait household, and just like his dad, Bubba found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with and got married to her. He met his wife, Tamara Strait, at a San Antonio Spurs game, where Tamara was a silver dancer. They got engaged in 2010 and married that December. A daughter named Jillianne Louise Strait was born in 2016, and a son named George Harvey Strait. I was born 2 years after they got married. Bubba doesn't use social media, but his wife, who is now a realtor, often posts pictures of them on Instagram. She once wrote on Instagram, "Being married is the hardest thing I've ever done, right before being a parent. It's not sailing." Harvey went on stage with his grandfather to sing George's song God in country music. Later, Harvey, his sister, their mother, and Grandma Norma were at Game 6 of the 2022 World Series. Grandpa George wore a Houston Astros hat and jersey while he and Harvey called the plays. In the same year, George told Cowboys and Indians that his grandson had played the drums for a while and might do it again later, but for now he's into baseball, hunting, and fishing. The famous singer also said that his granddaughter had sung a little and sounded pretty good. Since it's too early to tell what the kids will be in the future, their grandfather has decided to support them in whatever they do. He knows that his own story, from being an unknown ranch boy in Texas to a global country music star, no way he could have made up that story. And to have that and still be close with his family, especially his son Bubba, is clearly a luxury that not many superstars get. Bubba has made a name for himself in roping and music, thanks to his natural talent for writing songs. He never really tried to become a musician like his father, but he improved his skills enough to be able to share the stage with his father. Bubba, his wife Tamara, and their two kids, Jillian and Harvey, live at Texas Hill right now. He is still a kind person who gives back to his community, which is what you'd expect from a straight person who works hard and wants to succeed.